Friday eaters.
Yeah. So this is the main first room. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, you are here with us, taking us through.
Yeah, this gallery is sort of conceived as the portal for the whole show, or the hub. And there's not really one way that visitors are encouraged to go through the show. It's really a choose your own adventure, what draws your attention, allowing yourself, as the title of the show suggests, to be open to your curiosity and let that pull you through the show and see what you encounter.
So we come in and there's these like four structures here, like
That's
structures?
Yes, 4 structures plus a projection.
Okay.
So these structures are, as you can see, gigantic reflective devices that were all designed in Berlin, in the artist studio in Berlin, but designed specifically for the Geffen Contemporary at MOCA. So we had to do very sophisticated 3D modeling of the space so that the studio had exact dimensions, because as you can see, some of these go all the way up to our roof, and that those measurements needed to be really precise. In fact, this tall one over here goes straight through the roof. We took off 2 panels of our skylights.
Okay.
And it meets the outside world.
Okay.
Each of them has a different geometry.
Okay.
So there's a rectangle, a square, a triangle, and a hexagon.
Okay.
Each one produces a different kind of effect within the kaleidoscope based on how many facets there are, and also whether they are tilted toward one another at the top or go straight up, as in the rectangle. So the rectangle is the one with all right angles. Each of them presents you with a totally different visual world. So this is sort of our swimming pool. This goes all the way up to our skylight, and the grid of the skylight is enhanced by ropes of LED light that recapitulate. And as you can start to see, there's some rippling effect. The water, there it is.
There it goes.
So there are tiny motors at the top and a basin of water, and the motors periodically create this ripple effect. Because the mirrors do not taper in at the top, you end up with this sort of horizontal infinity effect.
Okay.
And this changes throughout the day. Since we just ended daylight savings time, it's darker outside now than it would have been 1 week ago at this time.
Yeah.
So if you come in the morning, you will see bright blue skies through these skylights, although they do have UV tinting on them, because as we know in LA, our skies can be quite overwhelmingly bright. So that was an on-the-fly decision that we had to make once the kaleidoscope had been installed here, and realizing that it would be nearly impossible to really look at directly if we didn't adjust the filters up there.
I think something I've started to notice reading about the show and seeing this show a couple times, when an average person walks in, it's like, before you see the water moving up top, I just assume, it's mirrors, and it's what I see is what I'm familiar with. But in fact, Olafur, as far as I can tell, is far beyond what the normal production science behind creating something like this.
It's interesting, because the way Olafur talks about his work, he wants you to be able to understand how it works, right? It's pulling back the curtain at the same time that it's dazzling you. So there's nothing really more to this than 4 reflective surfaces under skylights, illuminated by a little bit of LED light. And Olafur talks about his work as if he wants it to feel like it could be something you might make at home in your garage, at a smaller scale probably. But it takes a lot of imagination to come up with these relatively simple creations. So whenever I say that, people laugh, because they're not building giant kaleidoscopes in their garages, of course.
With the water surface on top.
Exactly.
That makes the angles work.
So Olafur is also really influenced by the light and space movement in California art, right, which deals with the atmosphere of Los Angeles, lets natural light be a factor often. And there are kind of references to LA, like baked into in these subtle ways into this show. Olafur came to LA, he did a site visit. We walked along the LA River. So this is, it's a swimming pool, but it's also the LA River up there. And he's taken inspiration from all of these different parts of the city that he's encountered. Olafur lived in LA in the 90s also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's been a dream of his since the 90s to take over this space and make it his own playground. So
that's great. Success. He made it.
Yeah. So this is really emblematic, I think, in a number of ways of the show because, for one, it's called Open. So that tells you how much he thinks of this as a center of the show. And it's a very simple device. It's a prism and a white light being shined on it.
Prism, white light.
Yep,
Okay.
So it's a piece of glass, but it creates what a prism does is break up the spectrum of visible light into its component parts. So you have a rainbow that's always on view. It's a real rainbow. It works the same way that a rainbow in the sky works. But we have one indoor instead.
Because in a sense, just like in the sky, it would go all the way around. But,
exactly. The reason that it doesn't is because you have outside, because you have the horizon, inside because you have the horizon of the floor.
And all of the color.
And all of the color.
Spectrum.
The rainbow and the components of visible light are really important to Olafur, and it might seem kind of straightforward and simple, but light is a totally complicated thing. It's a particle and a wave. And it's something that we're bathed in all the time, but we can't see unless it's broken up in some way. So he wants us to think about, how are we seeing and what do we see? How magical actually the very process of being in light is, of seeing how this is being not seen with our eyes, but constructed by our brains as we're looking at it.
The simplicity, the depth to the simplicity. I can see why it's such a fun show for people to come in. And too, I think with his work, it's not just like gimmicky, there's depth to it and there's much bigger story.
Very much so. It's engaged with the natural world and really with an idea of not having to have any prior knowledge about the artist, about the work coming in. There's so much to discover, right? The idea of surprise. That you, with the simplest means, can actually help people slow down and just take time to notice the world around them.
I mean, it's true. Obviously, you'd think, I imagine there's tons of people coming in that pull out their cameras and are like, wow, this is so cool, and trying to capture it. But at the same time, with that, it makes it easy to not do that and just be present, which is hard for so many of us these days, I think.
Exactly, right? And it gives you that space to pause. We find that a lot of times people will come in here and within a minute or two, they're actually lying on the ground underneath these kaleidoscopes, just watching them change.
There's this, ceiling effect of whatever's going on there, but then also this sort of Colosseum effect.
Exactly. We three here are a crowd, right, of observers. And then there's this planet that's created, and that's the difference with the tapered sides of the mirror. That's what creates that spherical form. And the imagery is created by a very simple combination of ink and water and glycerin. And again, a simple motor that moves the materials around. So it's oil and water, essentially. They won't mix. There's so much cosmos in it, right? But it's also the materials of the artist's studio at the same time, and what you can use with just how you can use the simplest materials to make this otherworldly sight.
Whoa.
And then suddenly you're like blasting into outer space.
The simplicity, but yet just mind-melting depth. both for the eyes and your brain.
Mm-hmm. But when you really look closely, you can see all those bubbles. You can see the material itself, how that ink is spreading through the water. And yet it remains this celestial body. You know, it's both things at once.
Yeah. It seems very calculated, but in the creative process, how much of it is trial and error before we get to these very precise, engineered structures?
I'll tell you, the studio does so much experimenting.
Okay, that's great.
They have a lot of space, and in fact had just acquired a new space that allowed them to test drive larger structures like this. But this show was in the making for 4 years. So that was 4 years of experimentation with form and scale and materials to get us to this point.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things that happens in the hexagon is this light effect. Olafur uses a monofilament light in here that erases all of the parts of the visible spectrum of light except for black, white, and yellow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's hard to tell what color your clothes actually are in here.
It's subtle, but for those at home that are seeing this, it's like, we are only yellow. I can see that I'm wearing jeans, but underneath this, it might not seem as mind-blowing, but it's crazy. Yellow jeans, who knew?
This is the same strategy that he used in a famous project at the Tate Modern in London.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was a big simulated false sun, and people laid down, again, they lay down on the floor, right? Just to experience basking in this fascinating light, and they would stay there for hours.
I'm wondering, like, the choice of this height. I mean, in some ways, it invites us all to step underneath it, but then it also feels like, I got my cowboy boots on, but just tall enough that you can't quite, be like messing with yourself.
Right, yeah.
I would assume that's very intentional as well.
Yeah, I mean, you still have the encounter with yourself, writ a million times over in the reflections, right? But there's less of an instinct, let's say, I mean, when you pass a mirror in a hotel lobby or whatever, you start kind of messing with your hair. This way, you're up in the installation, right? And less concerned with your own appearance as you are with your own experience.
Still a little vanity, as we check ourselves to the camera, are we doing, little pit stop.
As they move around, they also, our human brains want to make patterns all the time, figure out what things look like other things. And so they start to take on a little bit of like sea anemone, feelings, undersea creatures. Olafur refers to them as space junk. We've launched so many things up into space that are just floating around forever.
Yeah.
And the trash bags certainly also go back to our walk along the LA River and a little bit of a poetic homage to the grittiness of LA.
I'm noticing too for the first time the air ducts that are functioning obviously to push air onto the floaties, but they kind of actually create this cool constellation too amidst
Agreed.
the
it's
roof.
Sort of a polka dot.
Like floating, they kind of look like rocks, like floating rocks. And so I imagine when we step out of this, do our eyes kind of adjust a little bit? It actually doesn't linger too much. I feel like
this kaleidoscope might be my favorite of all.
Yeah.
Because of its total economy of means. It goes through our skylights.
Yeah.
And then that's it. It's the only one that doesn't have a motor attached to it. So what it is the skies of Los Angeles. As a planet, right?
An airplane just popped over.
Yep, exactly. So you stand under here long enough and you see airplanes and birds and police helicopters, and when we have a rainy season coming up, I'll be parked under here.
Oh, yeah.
Sunsets, sunrises. And again, us as these sort of spectators in this cubicle farm.
I can't remember what sci-fi, I don't know if it's like one of the later Star Wars where the newer technology Star Wars where there's a scene where there's kind of like all of these representatives of the galactic empire.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think of. And we got we got this beautiful golden hour.
Yes,
So
exactly.
we wondered if we were gonna, with the time change, if we were gonna be able to sneak in and getting some natural light. We just got it.
Just that little bit of golden glow creeping in around the edges.
And then you still also get a little bit of that spherical, it's not quite as planet-based as the oil, but when I zoom out, it still could be this huge mirrored planet above us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Olafur talks about things like, the magnitude of the sky above us and the ozone layer, things we can't see that are so essential to life on Earth. How do we even begin to visualize such things? And it's maybe through a little bit of defamiliarizing the everyday.
Sure.
There goes another
airplane.
helicopter. We've got some basic materials.
Yeah. Aluminum, stainless steel, kind of something?
Yep. Aluminum.
Yeah.
The most recyclable material on Earth.
Yeah.
That was all
Solid.
shipped here in these long strips from Berlin via sea freight. So a ship took these across the, across the Atlantic, landing in New York, and then getting to LA. And then the mirror portion is sort of like a mylar-like material. It's something that Olafur has worked with a lot, and it's called flex mirror. So it comes on these enormous rolls. So essentially, these frames were constructed, one facet, one side at a time. And then there is the company that does flex mirror, has a special kind of heating element. So the flex mirror gets rolled over the frame.
Okay.
And then this iron, essentially a hot tool, rolls over it and shrink wraps them.
Yeah.
So it's extremely lightweight compared to a glass mirror.
An actual mirror.
Yeah. Imagine what shipping would have been like, and the fragility of the glass mirror. This allows for so much more flexibility in the shapes that you make and the size that you can make things.
Wow. I mean, it's funny too. We get so focused on what's inside of them, and then you could make a point of arguing that the outside sculptural construction and being able to see it too. It's not, he chose not to like hide it or like make it nice and tucked away. We get to see all of the framing and then choosing to mirror the outside as well.
Exactly. It's like I said or was saying, about him wanting to pull back the curtain on everything. These aren't pristine, precise objects, even though the effects within look that way. But you can see the creasing in this flex mirror from the manufacturing, the assembly process. He's not afraid to let viewers know exactly how the magic works.
Yeah. Each one has its own distinct identity, and then they all play so well together. You start to, I naturally start to sort of anthropomorphize these structures, and they each have their own personality and like talk to each other a little bit.
They do. And they talk to the building too.
Yeah.
This is a space he's wanted to work in for decades. So that those reflective surfaces give you so much more of the building back to you. The messy infrastructure of this building that was first a hardware store built in the 1940s, and then was a police warehouse for decades before it became a contemporary art space. So it's got history.
Yeah.
It's got, it's got a uniqueness to it that some instincts might be to kind of cover over, right? But Olafur celebrates it.
Yeah. It's such a great space, man. That is, I think, the beauty of the Geffen is you get a lot of scale that you can play with.
It's a big space.
Yeah. For better, for good, and also I'm sure there's challenges to.
It can be very scary for some artists when they get the chance, right?
Yeah.
But it's such a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, now for something completely different. Yeah. I feel like we're now at another spaceship preparing to make some sort of plan for our future journey.
Indeed, yeah. And
exactly.
Pretty much. It's maybe avoiding climate disaster could be one part of this future. So this is a drawing machine that he's been inventing drawing machines since he was a kid. They all do different types of things and work different ways. I've seen painting machines of his installed in the desert that are solar powered.
Wow.
This one is a weather station. So we have a recording device on the roof of the Guffin right now, and it's transmitting wirelessly data about every day's heat to the drawing machine. At the same time, the drawing machine is getting information about the same day today, 50 years in the past in LA, and comparing those against one another. And then it's also aggregating them to make a prediction about the same day in LA 50 years from now.
Okay.
So each of the waves, the number of rotations it makes, and the density of the marks, these are all being influenced by either how similar or how different those measurements are.
Yeah.
And you take a look around the room, you see there's some extremely spiky drawings, right, which indicates a lot of difference. There are dense drawings where the spiral has gone around a lot of times. That's a very hot day.
Okay.
But they're not intended, to be these literal right,
what does this
representations.
Show us?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you see some days where even maybe the pen ran out of ink. We decided that's part of this too.
Cool.
So this gallery was, first full of just all these blank prepared canvases, and now you can see the number of days actually we've been open to the public, because we make one every day.
Okay.
We're open, and so slowly this gallery will fill up, and I'm really curious whether there will be visible difference between the ones that we started making where we had a heat wave and an earthquake, to what happens in the wintertime. What happens when it's raining and cold, or at least what we think of as cold in LA.
Yeah.
You're going to see, I think, a lot of variation. And all together, they will be kind of a diary of the weather in Los Angeles while the show was up.
This show is open for a long time, so there'll be a lot of these.
There will be.
Is there more than just this room, or does this actually add up to?
It's close to it. We will be making a few additional ones. Yeah.
And then these, these are placed low, just to kind of.
Yeah, we worked out a system. So what we do is start by filling up the entire bottom row of blanks.
Okay.
And you can see an empty spot on the wall. That's where today's drawing was hanging. It'll go back on the wall. And then as soon as we have a full row all the way around the room, that row gets moved up and a new blank row gets moved down. That's just so people don't have to get up on ladders or lifts every morning.
Smart. And then I can imagine for little ones who are coming in and seeing this, it's fun to get up close and not touch, but.
Not touch, of course, no touching.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful to observe children experience this show. Also wonderful to observe adults experience this show. There's a lot of magic and awe that it creates, but also curiosity about what are these things and what's happening. So people, especially in this gallery, ask questions all the time, every day.
Yeah. This has actually just occurred to me. So, because when I see it being drawn, it's like, oh, it's pen on paper, but these are wood boards. It's like plywood boards. And what is the top surface actually?
That is paper.
It is, okay.
Yeah, so that's a prepared paper adhered to the plywood boards.
Okay.
And we had a fabricator nearby make all of these for us based on the studio's specifications.
Wow, some of the mellower ones.
Sweltering Day.
Sweltering Day, but the most beautiful aesthetically, right?
It is, It's not quite as geometric as the others, and just there's like almost a floral.
Right. You can sort of see a rose or a chrysanthemum. But like also almost like a wormhole in the universe.
Yeah. And it's funny to think it's all being created from the same process with drastically different visual outcomes.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Is there some cyclical repetition to the imagery, or is it always just ever changing and ever different?
There is no possibility of a replicated image in this work. And when we look behind it, you'll understand why that is. It's always changing, and it's always a new configuration of elements. And it takes you from, as we were seeing in the kaleidoscopes, to scenes that look like you're in the deepest sea with deep underwater marine creatures to being launched out into the cosmos.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you'll see what look to be perhaps organic forms coalescing. And again, when we look behind it, you'll see how that's created.
Because when, of course, we first come in, we think, oh, screen, projection, seen it before, nothing that special.
Right.
But then
you could guess maybe that this was a computer-generated, even AI-driven simulation of some sort. But that's just not the way that Olafur Eliasson works.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
So this is a work that was made actually during the initial stages of COVID. Olafur's collected, he's a big collector, he's collected prisms and optical devices and navigation devices and the like for years and years. And so in lockdown in Berlin, decided to go have a look at what he'd amassed. And maybe make something of it. So everything that's happening in this projection is the product of light reflecting from glass that he's arranged in this very specific way. And tiny motors are turning these light rings, which is why, and they're all moving at different speeds, so that's why you'll never have the exact same configuration of elements. You'll see similarities, right? If you watch this for hours, you'll see patterns cropping up, but it's always different.
So just jumping back, are these just things he's collected?
Yeah. And that he assembled for this work.
So what's so fun about that to me is that, you know, you see again his work, you see it, how it's constructed, and I think, oh, it's got to be so exact, and he's created all of these different objects and shapes, but in fact, there's still, like a lot of other art practices, kind of this creative, natural, loose assemblage of, oh, I found this and it was kind of cool, I found this, and put them together. And there is the science that he uses, but there's also the free flow and playful, creativity.
There's a lot of chance operation in this work.
Chance, yes, yeah.
And then if you take a look in here, this is an additional part of what's making those visual effects in the projection, which is, again, a lot of these glass pieces that he's collected over the years, arranged just so. And if you get the right angle, you can also see that there's a fern in there somewhere. And so when there are algae-like forms in the visual, when there's something algae-like that appears in the projection, it's basically the reflection of that plant being picked up.
Interesting. Just like a normal, like a synthetic fern, or?
No, it's a real fern from one of our colleagues' mother's backyard.
Awesome. There you go, another example of nothing's too tight. There's some spontaneity and some creativity that, a lot of creativity and spontaneity that goes into a lot of this.
Exactly.
It's so fun to then see, you know, again, going back to when you first enter, it's just this flat wall, and it begs the question in a sense of like, is it more about this side or is it more about the other side being the finished product?
Yeah, and again, the artist is really open to it. It's up to you. It's up to everybody individually. Some people tell me they find this side to be the more beautiful side. Even. But it's, as with all of his work, it's not complete until you complete it in your mind with your experience of it.
I don't even know how to describe. I mean, we can say it's, sort of underwater or galaxy. This is not any normal screensaver. You know,
No,
it's like,
no, it sure isn't.
This is, especially when you get to see the physical objects that make that image, that flat image, and all the different, just the positioning of it all. This screen here and the lights and the...
A lot of imagination and a little bit of ingenuity.
Yeah.
Combined to make this happen. And we've all, laid on the floor of a living room and watched the shadows of a tree, pass across the wall, or, just watched shadows moving in the play of light. And this takes that experience to a kind of, nth degree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whew. That's a heater.
It's called pluriverse assembly.
Pluriverse assembling.
Different it is from when you walked in.
And now that our eyes get adjusted to it as well, like it changes, or adjusted to the dark room. And just the color. I mean, it's the shapes, but it's the color, the movement. Whew. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Rebecca's like, yes, this is true.
No,
heard this.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's like, this work gives you real freedom and permission to just enjoy yourself, right?
Yeah.
To not be too skeptical of like beauty and loveliness.
I like that, not to be too skeptical. How long, I think we might have hit this before, but with a show like this at a museum, what kind of lead time goes into planning this, coming up with the proposal? Is this, I mean, I'm a little familiar, but for those who don't, I mean, sometimes I feel like museums get a bad rap, and it's like, oh, museums kind of whatever, boring museums, but it's like, so much of what we do is trying to tell the story of like, no, museums serve a very important role in the art community and in the art world of providing, like nobody else could do this show other than an institution.
That's right, yeah, and nobody else could do this particular show but us here at the Geffen, because things were custom built for these spaces. The short answer is this took 4 years.
4 years. 4 years.
But that's a lot of time with experimentation, with discussion, with reflection, and then finally with implementation.
Yeah. I think it's just so fun to note that because, again, as a consumer, we can all come in and be like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then knowing that 4 years and a lot of hard work and a lot of time and resources go into these things, that it really, it increases the meaning of it. So here we are at yet another kind of structure.
This is Room for Spatial Imagination.
That's the name?
It is.
Feels like that's an accurate name.
Yeah.
Room for spatial
imagination.
Imagination.
Rehearsal room for spatial imagination.
Rehearsal room for spatial imagination.
Which you'll understand maybe a little bit better once we enter.
Okay, yeah. So similar to kind of the other pieces, but...
Yeah, but it's doing its own thing, and be forewarned, there's some flashing strobe-like effects in here. There are 4 corners to this structure, which began its life being called Pythagoras House. So that tells you something about its mathematical origins. The images that you're seeing range from the most simple to a much more complex iteration of a dodecahedron, which is a shape that's used to model 3-dimensional space. And what's being created, just like in the kaleidoscopes in the opening gallery, is being created through the power of reflection. So essentially you have just a few LED lights up in the ceiling here, and because of the mirrored surfaces, the form is completed. Wow. So over here you can see a form that's far, far more complex.
Yeah. And that my brain can't even totally conceptualize where it starts and ends, or what's off of the mirror and what is being created from the mirror.
The illusion is very, very hard to parse.
Yeah.
And very effective.
It's so funny, you think going from one structure to the other, it's like, oh, I'll be able to figure it out, or like, I'm used to it now, I kind of get it, but each one, it's like, nope, this is incredible.
And the rhythm which the lights are coming on and off, was programmed by Olafur. It's almost like a musical score. It has some rhythm and fluidity to it, and these moments of right.
Yeah.
That's a real high note.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of the more like flashing, intense lights.
Yeah.
And then in the center, there's a little space for you to look up and see yourself.
Yeah, it almost feels like, I mean, it's disorienting because I don't know what exactly the effect is, whether that's the absence of the flashing lights, but it feels like we are way farther away from ourselves, even though it's not that far away.
Right.
Because either the tube is creating that or it's so fun. It's one of those things like, if I could put better words to this for you viewers at home, you gotta come see it yourself. Yeah, what does that do? So we're in this like black tube and we're seeing ourselves, but it's almost again like it's a different universe above us.
Yeah, what it does for me in my mind is in combination with this modeling of 3D space that's happening around us, but that is not actually 3D.
Yeah.
This feels more real than it feels like a reflection.
Yeah.
I feel like that's me up there rather than me on a flat reflective surface.
Well said. That's why you're the pro curator. Yes, we got it. It's so true. I mean,
It's like, yeah, you mean.
It's like, yeah, there, guys.
You get like a little bit of a head rush sometimes after.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the light or the fact that my head's now tilting back down.
Exactly.
Whew, okay.
Yeah.
A little bit more like normal space.
Exactly, more human scale.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more like what it's like to visit Olafur Eliasson's studio.
Yeah.
Experiments, different types of media and materials all over the place. And you can see him just working through this idea of visible light in so many different ways.
Yeah. And so again, similar with these kind of kaleidoscope-esque, but more just individual.
Yeah, one person at a time really for these.
Yeah.
And they each, like the larger kaleidoscopes, do contain a kind of a planet.
Yeah.
In this case, and we often get asked also if these are digital projections, but no, this is 2 panes of glass with rivulets of water running through them in a little bit of colored light.
Okay. So that movement is the water.
Exactly, it's just slowly dripping.
Yeah. How many head bonks have occurred?
Not a single head bonk.
Don't lean in. Don't lean in. and kind of a matching here, or
this is a different process. This is 2 different polarizing filters.
Okay.
That slowly rotate against one another. So the longer you stand and watch, the more you'll see the colors of this apparition start to shift. Similar technology as is used on like skiing, like Oakley's, sunglasses, polarizing sunglasses. That reflects, that it cuts a certain wavelength of light out to reflect, to cut down on glare. But if you rotate them together, if you add several polarization filters, they create these very interesting and beautiful effects.
Even too how the structure is used, like the creases of where the glass or the material comes together, creating that line, that then the line is part of, almost as powerful as the shapes that it makes to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, there's a lot of ideas that one can pontificate about.
This is another example of how cool polarization can be and how it works. Because what you're seeing is made up of only white light, no colored lights.
No colored light.
And the reason it's changing colors as you move around it is because of those polarization filters on those facets.
It's not as if, we enter and we think, oh, cool sculpture with some colored glass on it is the natural thought. But
Exactly.
because it's Olafur, we know that there's something else going on.
Right.
And so these individual panels they change color.
They're not in fact changing color.
Right.
Right.
If they're just reacting to the light differently depending
Exactly.
on how they overlap.
And it depends on the position of you in your own body,
Yeah.
how that light is splitting through the polarization filter.
And then we've got kind of a more traditional
The most kind of
surface.
obviously handmade things,
Yeah.
maybe objects in the show. These paintings are made by Olafur on a rotating table, and he actually begins painting them quite loosely, almost expressionistically. He's making decisions about the next color as he goes. So they're not mapped out beyond the fact that they're all going to explore the chromatics of visible light.
Yeah.
They're water-based pigments.
Okay.
And the way they get finished, I mean, the effects that you're seeing are made with ice. So he gets the pigments to the place that he feels they're ready, and then ice in the center melts outward and creates this rippling ringed effect.
Okay. It's fun. We're on this journey that can go any direction, I think, in this whole show. And then you have some of this more material, well, it's all material, but more organic, especially, I guess, with the ice, tangible material that some of the reflective and light doesn't have.
Yeah, it's
He did it
more, it's what we call, more of the artist's hand here.
Yes.
right?
Okay. The artist's hand.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And he actually is here in all of this work,
Yeah.
tinkering and tooling, but here you can really see what he's made by hand, by himself.
Yeah. He and the ice. Yeah.
So here we are in the listening dimension.
The listening dimension. Is that the name?
That's the name of this work, yeah.
Okay.
Which existed before the show, but Olafur reconfigured the work to specifically fit this space, which we call the upper bunker. And once again, just like peering behind the pluriverse assembly, the illusion is captivating, but you also get to see how it's created. Right? So you can peek behind the curtain again in here. You can see the scaffolding behind these mirrors, again, made of that same mylar type reflective surface. And even then, I think it still takes a minute to figure out what is going on here.
Because these have got to be some heavy weighted plates and structures that can hold the leverage of those half circles.
Yeah.
Those look pretty formidable, pretty substantial.
They have to be substantial, to support the weight of these semicircles that present visually as rings. And each one, so there's a single ring on this facet, 2 rings over here, and 3 on this surface, but then they get repeated, of course, infinitely. And something we've noticed in here too is that I can see you over and over and over again, but I can't see me. I'm blocking my own reflection.
I see a ton of you, but only one of me.
Exactly.
I see like a little bit of the hands.
Right, exactly, like if you could have.
But I can't, my face, the eye, the actual, you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the other fun thing too I'm noticing is, again, the different dimensions where we can look here. You obviously get the floating ring right in front of us. That's the effect. But then if I look to the side, there's this series of rings over here just floating in space that are not...
Where are they even coming from?
Where are they even coming from? Yeah, exactly. Like, they're not... I know, I mean, I can get there, but they're not out of this reflection here, and they're not right here. They're whatever the extra element dimension that is.
As much as I understand exactly how this works, I still find myself confounded up here on the regular. Going, oh no, wait, I hadn't noticed that one. And where's that one coming from?
It's really great. I mean, again, it's so refined, but then there is this like very playful, childlike curiosity and imagination. I'm thinking of the word from the other space that you feel from the artist. I think. I mean,
Right?
you know.
There's an enthusiasm for the world, right? And
Yeah.
all of the cool things in it that include mirrors.
Yeah.
Mirrors are wild.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you can do with them.
Well, all the things you can do with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these are these
They're brass.
brass?
Yeah.
Whew, yeah, those would be.
They're heavy.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Don't lean on these to take a break. John's face.
There's something about this space too that with these mirrors gives you the feel of like a ballet studio, right? Like
Yeah.
you just want to twirl around.
yeah.
It's another place we might do
Yeah.
some very simple
Ooh.
dancing.
Yeah, totally.
Of 9 yellow lights and 1 white light.
Okay.
And based on the principles of light mixing, this creates yellow to purple in the spectrum of your shadows.
Yeah. So it's hard to see. It's a little more subtle to the viewer at home, but I feel like as we get closer, you see in like
can
the
really
shadow.
See those tones, yeah.
Yeah.
These are tones that are opposite one another on the spectrum of visible light. So it's that
Okay.
1 white light that breaks the yellow.
Yeah.
But what's really nice about this space is that people start dancing as soon as they
Yeah.
recognize what's going on in here. And sometimes they'll start dancing even with strangers. You
Oh,
know,
that's
because your
great.
shadows can touch.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be too awkward, right? And kids always start
Oh,
dancing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost it's one of those, I'm trying to see. Yeah. Even as you step back, you get wider shadows, but it's still pretty crisp. It's something. It's so simple, but yet it's like
It's just neat.
can't help but just take my attention and get a little bit hypnotized.
Exactly. Something that's hugely important to know in here
Yeah.
is that Olafur Eliasson was a award-winning breakdancer in his youth. And
What?
so dance is has been a big part of his life.
Do people know? I feel like that's like a new tidbit of information I've never heard.
You can Google it.
Okay. From all I can tell, this is a very like astute, sort of quiet, artistic man that we see today. Apparently killer breakdancer.
Killer breakdancer. He did some moves back here. I've seen
Really?
it with my own eyes.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just walk through.